So now we have one more NAASC Community Award, and this award is going to Román Ramos Báez. Dr. Báez here, come on up. So Romy is currently a postdoc at the University of Chicago working on auxin evolution. And he is also, he did his PhD at the University of Washington with Jem Nimhauser, also working on auxin signaling and auxin synthetic biology. His bachelor's degree was at University of California, Berkeley. And throughout these moments in his career, he has been doing lots of outreach and service to the community, to the Arabidopsis, the plant science community, creating safe spaces for non-binary scientists. This has been done in several ways. He has written extensively on this, has created outreach activities that encompass campus activities as well as international activities. And because of these efforts, we are recognizing him with an award today. I also want to say that during his science, he has contributed extensively to understanding how auxin signaling works and how we can use synthetic circuits to control auxin signaling, publishing several very important papers, and also has been the recipient of very important fellowships in science. So we're very happy to have him today to talk about his science and also about his outreach efforts. So Rami, thank you very much for joining us today, and we have an award for you today. So much.
Thank you.
This is the control, forward, back, and the pointer.
Okay. Okay. Can y'all hear me? Does it work? Okay. Well, thank you so much for that award, and thank you for being here, for having me. I think because I'm talking about queer and trans issues, I understand that those are controversial. I'm here to help, and so if this is anything that's productive for you, I hope you take it home with you, and anything that isn't, it's okay. Yes, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my science. So just one slide. The auxin response is really well conserved, the nuclear auxin response in land plants, and at least the canonical response. All these biochemical functions have to be functional for you to get the auxin to turn into a transcriptional response. And if we look at the closest relatives to land plants, the homologs for this response, a lot of them have these biochemical functions, but there's multiple important functions revolving around actually the sensing of the auxin and the binding of the auxin that are missing. And so using these extant algal sequences and extant plant sequences, we don't have enough information to really know the order in which these different biochemical functions appeared and how they came together productively to eventually become a fully functional pathway. So I'm interested in how these pathways originate, and hopefully learning more about the auxin response and how that originates, we can learn more about how other pathways originate. So my preferred method is ancestral sequence reconstruction, which allows us to actually predict these proteins from millions of years ago, and then resuscitate them in plants or in yeast and see their functions there. And so I'm working with some mutational libraries in yeast to test their functions. Right. So I used to be the director for Front and Center Plant Science. You might have been hearing about it. If you've been wanting to join, there's a QR code for that. And I'm no longer the director. I passed the baton on to Sanbon Gosa at the University of Illinois. So yeah, just letting y'all know about that. I'm really excited about what he's going to do with that initiative. So there are younger people are more and more identifying as LGBTQ. It's not a pyramid scheme, it's not some conspiracy, it's just the fact that I think, well, my opinion is that gender roles are playing less and less of a role in the freedoms that we have and how we can live out our lives. And so people are feeling more and more comfortable kind of being themselves in these ways. And so there's other reasons why. But regardless, a lot of the outreach that I do is focused on queer youth, so people 16 to 24. That means high schoolers that are getting ready to go to college, graduate students, and undergraduate students. And so if a third of your students are queer, then you're probably going to want to understand a little bit more about how to be good mentors to them, right? And so that's kind of where I've come in. I've been doing outreach for a really long time in this area. I also did a lot of drag shows and things like that just to meet people in the community outside of science and understand their experiences, and just because it's fun. Before I was even a grad student, and then around 2020, a lot of the gigs became virtual, and so I would post them on social media so people could attend. And because I'm a scientist, a lot of science people started seeing them and wanting me to do advocacy and actually working with them. And so I ended up doing work with like Seattle Pride, Shut Down STEM, with all sorts of different, I work with non-binary scientists to ask for organizations like the NSF, NIH, and HHMI to actually start collecting data that includes questions about sexual orientation and gender outside of male and female, because without this data, it's really hard to advocate for these people and to say like what their needs are and what their experiences are. And so there's very little data there. Actually, there's a professor called Professor Keck in the University of Michigan who started a whole lab around LGBTQ STEM experiences and like data collection there. So there's some data coming in, but a lot of it is just saying like that these people are feeling like they don't belong or they're feeling uncomfortable, but it's not saying to the core like what really is causing this discomfort or this like lack of sense of belonging. And so I've dug really deep into these issues and ended up learning about all these things that I'm gonna tell you about today. A lot of them are really difficult to hear, but I'm gonna focus, I think by focusing on the people that are, I think, suffering the most in these communities, we can learn a little bit more about like where the stigma is coming from and like what other people are experiencing that maybe experience one of these things or like just are exposed to these things. So, right, so actually in 2021 in ICAR, I got to lead a module, I think it was what it's called, or a workshop, where I invited a professional, because now that people are reaching out to me and asking for advice, I felt like it was my responsibility to learn about other experiences and to actually have a professional in LGBTQ healthcare and wellness to come talk to me, and so we could together brainstorm for like what he understands and like what I understand about what it means to be in academia to find solutions. And so I invited him here so that we could have a conversation with other scientists to see if other people had ideas. And this is kind of like I'm gonna just really quickly go through these slides because I don't have enough time, but you can read what's on them. But for the most part, but like the main gist of it is that there's a lot of stigma around these identities that can lead to opportunity denial directly, or it could also cause people harm and can lead to criminalization. We're in an international meeting where in a lot of other countries it can be illegal just to exist. But even in the US, which is expected to be liberal, there's a lot of laws that come into place that make it really difficult to exist out in public. And all of these, and like all this harm and all this experience of criminalization can make it hard, like having a criminal record can now make it hard to get a job, adds more to the stigma, and then it's like a self-feeding cycle, right? And so, stigma and erasure, we know that there's stigma. We see a lot of bullying happening in high school students and in undergraduate students. We see it. A lot of these teens, about half, like almost half of them, have suicidal ideations, and there's a lot of bills that are directly targeting them and their existence because, you know, like I said, like this increase in LGBTQ people being out has been scary to a lot of people, and so there's a lot of trying to stop them from being out and open about these things. And you know, a lot of people in school, they have issues where they don't feel safe, and they have a hard time getting employment. I think a lot of times these issues, because they're associated with sex, they can be seen as like unprofessional, and so just like people that are queer can be seen as like not fitting professional settings. And these are really difficult statistics to read, but these, so the center that Jorge Ramos works in, it kind of has people coming in that need help immediately. And so from the people that are intakes to the center, these are kind of like the things that they report experiencing. And so a lot of these people are actually experiencing these things that are associated with their queer identities. And when the intakes that they have that aren't queer people have a lot lower incidence of experiencing all of these different things. So these really are associated with their queerness and their transness. And all of this, of course, leads to all the things that I said in this cycle, right? So should we be having these conversations in academia? Like, there's a no and there's a yes for everything. I think people will say these are unprofessional topics, but these topics can be addressed in ways that keep people's dignity and preserve them in ways that are important. We're not experts, we can invite experts. It's emotionally exhausting to talk about. It's emotionally exhausting to experience them. And so this is like a little bit of emotional exhaustion to learn about things that I think help us when we do hear from experts and they tell us to do things and we think, like that doesn't make any sense. Like actually now we understand why we're being asked to do certain things and we're more likely to actually take action. Solutions, some of the solutions are really difficult to implement. Some of them are actually pretty easy. Some solutions I've come up with is if you're having a class and you want, and maybe the records don't match people's like pronouns or names, you can ask them via email beforehand, and the students can tell you privately without you having to make that mistake in front of everybody. You can have resources linked on your website, on your department website, on your own website, like OSTEM, and you can have, or other organizations. There's LGBTQ Plant Science, I think, is a resource as well. Root and Shoot has a lot of resources for LGBTQ students and for mental health resources. And you know, you don't have to ask your students invasive questions about their experiences, as long as they have access to the ability to take care of themselves. A lot of these people have conflicts with their families, and they have a hard time finding a support network. And so this is why it's important that students get paid enough that they can exist on their own independently, and take care of their communities, because a lot of these students, even if they're not having these experiences, they're taking care of each other. And then also being able to access medical care and mental health care so that they can, again, take care of themselves. And always, you know, be on the lookout for signs that your students are maybe experiencing these types of things, and that way you can point them to these resources if they can't find them on their own. Oh, that's it. So if you have any questions for me, you can email me. You can find me on social media on Sensitive Roots. And I am happy to answer. No stupid questions. Yes, I won't get offended.